Well, thank you, folks. We appreciate your attendance today. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, The Food Industry, Solutions for the Back Office. This will be the first in a series of webinars addressing issues for the back office in the food industry. And the reason being is, as you'll see as we go through this, there are a lot of issues that really are unique in the food business, depending on where you fall in the food chain. And rather than try to cram it all in one session, we're going to do it in a series of sessions. That way we can have all the relevant subject matter. So to start off with, introductions are in order. My name is Jim O'Rourke, and I'm in the business development side of the house here at ICG Consulting. And I am joined today by my colleague, Lynn Fern. And Lynn is a subject matter expert, and Lynn will be helping me with the presentation, and we'll be doing the demo that you'll see later on in the session. The agenda for today, we're going to start off by talking just a little bit about us so that you know exactly who it is you're talking to, and about our food industry experience to put some kind of context behind that as we start talking about some of the things and some of the companies that we've helped over the years that might be relevant to the experiences that you're going through today. We're going to discuss some of the challenges that we see in the food industry, and we hope that, and we think that a lot of the discussion points there will resonate with what you're facing in your back office today. Then we're going to wrap it up with a solutions demo in which we're going to feature Dot Foods. And we'll talk a little bit more about why we think Dot Foods is a very unique and good candidate to demo to really highlight the solutions for the food industry. They really do have kind of a unique position there. Many of you are probably familiar with Dot Foods and more than likely are doing business with them because they have a very ubiquitous presence in the food industry. So starting off, who is ICG? We're a solution developer, systems integrator, and consultant, kind of blend it all in one. And what we do is we bring solutions for financial back office, and in food industry, obviously being one of the verticals that we have a lot of experience in. We're not a software company in terms of bringing canned software out of the box, nor are we a straight line consulting company who just comes in and kind of gives you high level solutions and walks away. We really are the people that kind of try to understand your process and then craft a solution that's going to help you around that and then work with your existing systems. We've been in business since 1990. We're based in Scottsdale, Arizona, although we do have customers throughout North America. And our focus is strictly on the back office side, vendor management, accounts payable, accounts receivable, tax, and you'll see as we talk about a number of other areas that we really focus on. To that extent, we're an ERP agnostic business. So we're not dialing as strictly a partner for any particular platform. Our solutions have been integrated and work with virtually all of the commercial systems out there, be it ERP systems, inventory systems, material management systems, you name it. We've dealt with most all of them and integrated with most all of them, including a lot of homegrown, which are quite prevalent in the food business. So we really do have that experience regardless of what kind of a back-end system you're on. We have also a very diverse client base. Obviously, our focus today is going to be on food industry, but we really do have clients, that span a number of different industries, and we think that's pretty important because, believe it or not, there are things that we learn from customers who may be in hospitality or energy or other sectors that are kind of outside of the world that you folks live in that really do have applicability. We'll see certain things that'll pop up, and we'll go, hey, that I can see where that would fit in that particular issue. So besides the experience that we have in the food, we certainly do bring a number of other situations that come to play here. So talking about our experience in the food business, we've really been over 25 years in working with people in the food industry. And this slide really kind of illustrates, that there's really a whole chain of people, as you well know, that deal in this business. They're on the manufacturing side of the house, who obviously create the products and services, whether that's process or discrete, and they flow those and sell those generally, not always, but generally, sell those goods through a distribution network, whether it be a straight line, broadline distribution company, through food service network, whatever the case may be. Again, that gets distributed, and then those distributors, those food service providers, again, are working with the retail, restaurant, and what I would call, for lack of a better word, the kind of the end user community. And interestingly enough, as those food products flow down through the chain, so do those issues that tend to be prevalent. There are pricing issues and any number of issues that come into play here. So I want to talk a little bit about that now. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the issues involved here, and I'm going to bring it into the conversation now, so you don't have to just listen to me drone on. My colleague Lynn Fern, who's been involved with the company for well over 20 years and has been involved in most of these food industries, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges in the back office, the complexities, the transactions, weights and measures, perishables, the regulations that control much of the industry in different segments, complex program relationships, complex data flows, and all of you in this industry, as you well know, are always fighting low margins, so that you really are challenged to operate very efficiently and to keep costs at a minimum and to get things done in a very efficient manner. Lynn, anything you want to add at this point before we jump into the actual very specific application areas that we want to talk about?
I think I will, Jim, just at the high level, and you touched on the complexities, but thinking through them a little bit more, the complexities start out, as the manufacturers have program relationships with the end users. So, and then the distributor is in the middle, and we have to make sure that all the information involved in all those programs and all the products and the pricings, those all make it to all the respective parties at the right time. And making sure that all of the different systems that are involved with everyone in the channel are updated on a timely basis. And so, there's complexities at the start of a program with all the transactions that go on. As Jim said, it's the high transaction volume is it's everywhere in the industry. And so in the food industry, more than any of the others that we've dealt with, really has a high volume of disputes and deductions. And so on the accounts receivable side, customers are deducting, from people because of the pricing issues or because of, delivery issues, either, either the quantity was off or a different product was shipped, or unit prices are different again because of the programs, or maybe it's a perishable and maybe the price at the time of the initial transaction was set at one amount, and then later it was switched to another just due to time. All of those things flow through, and then you have on the accounts receivable side, they're kind of the last step, and so they're left with making sure that the transaction in totality is clean. And so that's really what makes the food industry and the financial transactions so complex is the high volume, the number of parties, the programs, and just human error. And so that's something that we've worked very hard on in the past 20 plus years, is understanding that, appreciating that, and trying to work with our customers, whomever they may be in that chain, understanding their culture and their systems to try to come up with a solution that makes it the most efficient possible for them in light of all these complexities.
Super. So now that we've taken that on at a little bit high level, let's kind of go down a level. Let's talk about, and have Lynn, if you would please maybe discuss some of the very specific application areas that we focused on, within the back office, and some of the things that we can help people with.
Sure. Starting out, as we started out in accounts payable, and that was kind of where our focus was initially. And we would help our customers, 20 years ago, and then it's progressed through time. We've really worked with them to improve their invoice receipt and making sure that we're getting as much electronic invoicing in, because that makes everyone's life easier. So we get those in either through EDI, we have email import capabilities, and we also introduced portal capabilities for vendors to submit invoices from that perspective as well. But we do work with our customers and almost do a vendor analysis to say what technologies would work with your vendor community so that we can maximize those electronic capabilities. Once we do that, we then we have the capability to bring in workflows to automate three-way matching and also non-PO approval routing. And that's important because, you know, as Jim mentioned earlier, there's homegrown systems out there that have some great functionality, but maybe they're not keeping up with what today's needs are and what today's issues are. And so, you know, we don't try to replace an ERP by any respect. Really what we do is we try to augment the functionality that's there. So bringing in those workflows can provide some efficiencies as well. One of the other pieces that kind of leads into this third bullet point is consolidating the repositories and work streams into one tool, despite the number of systems that you have in the background. Some of our customers, a number of our customers have different inventory and accounting systems, or they've got multiple inventory systems or multiple accounting systems that have really come together over time through acquisition. And so one of the things that we can do is essentially we build work streams that will do the interfacing so that the individual users don't have to deal with the complexities of multiple systems. From an accounts receivable perspective, we can help with cash application and making sure that all of the information is available when you're trying to do that cash application, and then and either allowing the ERP to do the actual cash application, or us providing a facilitating service to do that. You know, as a result of cash application, hopefully you've got a large amount that have matched and have applied, but then you've got all of those invoices that don't apply automatically, and that's when human intervention has to come in. So we can build and have built workflows that enable the routing, automation, and management of the customer deductions. So making sure that you've got an easy-to-use user interface for your internal resources to try to determine what the problem is, and then making sure that there's workflows that can route things through to various different departments in your organization to help solve those problems. And then finally, the other aspect is working and making sure that your customers can get at your invoices from an online perspective, and also then giving them an avenue to report in discrepancies from the actual shipment that was provided. So, you know, if you go and you make a delivery, and let's say that you were supposed to deliver, 15 cases, and one of the cases was damaged, but maybe the customer doesn't realize that until after your driver has left, providing an online way for the customers to interact with you so that you don't have to wait for 2 or 3 weeks or when they pay the bill to realize that there's an issue. From a tax perspective, some of our customers have sales and use tax issues, and so we can work with your ERP and provide critical information to make sure that the tax paid is correct. And also we can create and have created workflows that enable ad hoc audits. So let's say that you do business in the state of Texas and you know that you've got county audits coming up, or you've got county audits that occur on a regular basis. You can designate certain items to be routed to, a tax queue. Maybe it's by a dollar amount or a dollar threshold that pass through to some sort of a tax expert, just again to do a periodic audit and make sure you're in compliance. Customer service is a big deal for us internally to ICG, and we know with our customers it's the same. And so in customer service to a lot of our clients, it really is true customers. It's also vendor questions, or it's internal inquiries. And so we really try to work with our clients to do is to open up through portal capabilities, or open up through other capabilities, a lot of avenues to share information. And so, trying to make it so that vendors are self-service. They have the capability to go look and see what the status of an invoice is, or go look and see what the status of a dispute is. And then from an internal perspective, you also want to make sure that the internal resources have a place to go to answer their own questions, so they're not always calling or emailing, really, again, giving them the tools to do the job themselves. The other piece of the puzzle is when you do have a question from one of your customers or one of your vendors, making sure you've got supporting workflows internally to route that inquiry to the right person to answer the question. So, if a vendor has an issue, and let's say that they say, yes, this was delivered and I've got a proof of delivery, you want to make sure ultimately that item is seen by someone in a warehouse somewhere to confirm, yes, they're right. Let's go ahead and pay back that particular deduction. Um, let's see. Next one is supplier onboarding. This is kind of an administrative function, but it's really important now in today's transacting world. Every company wants to make sure that they've got the right information that they need in order to vet a vendor prior to doing business. And so, the portals that we provide allow a common online form for your suppliers to come in, provide the information that you need in order to do business with them. And we try to work with you without the entire organization to make sure that we're pulling all the information together so that the vendor only really has to provide that information one time, as opposed to 4 different times as each department gets involved. We also provide workflows that facilitate the vetting process. So once the vendor provides the information in the online form, we can do automatic validations, check OFAC lists and do TIN checks and those sorts of things. But there's typically some sort of a workflow internally where people want to review, say, the insurance requirements and make sure things are okay there, or there's a few questions that they have. In some industries, depending on how much money you're going to spend with that vendor, they may have to go do a background check. So it's those sorts of workflows that we implement. And then once the vendor has vetted and you're doing business with them, it's always important to make sure that as expiration dates come up, that you're notified and the vendor is notified so they can update their information. And one of the key ones here is the certificate of insurance, because no one wants to be doing business with someone if the certificate of insurance is expired. Probably one of the more complex parts of the food industry, and both Jim and I have mentioned this previously, really the distributor finance, the sales incentive systems. And these are all these detailed programs that go on, again, between the manufacturer and the distributor, between the manufacturer and the customer, and then between the distributor and the customer. And through our experiences, we've provided systems that allow and accept imported electronic sales data from customers and from distributors. And you can then bring that together and compare that to the internally generated sales information to then understand, what are the sales program deductions that are going to be coming in, and validating those before they become a problem. And I will say that one was probably one of the most intensive ones that we did, but it ended up being one of the most beneficial for the customer.
Super. So as you can see, there's a lot of complexities involved and a lot going on there. As Lynn just discussed, and again, we could spend really hours getting into the nitty gritty in all of these areas, but wanted to focus on just a few of those today. And also wanted to make the point that, our goal in how we ICG interact with our customers in your industry and any others is our goal is not to replace your existing system, but to fill the gaps. We find that there are a lot of different gaps as we go out and talk to, Dot Foods, who you're going to see here, and many of our other customers in the business and other businesses. They have very robust systems that they're working with, that spend a lot of money, a lot of time with. They have processes that they've worked on and perfected over the years. And our goal, and what we're not suggesting, is that, we're going to come riding in on the white horse and replace all those. Not at all. Really, our focus is to come in and find out where those gaps are, where those little pockets of inefficiencies are, where you're kind of missing something in that sales incentive data or other aspects that really could kind of streamline that, make that a little easier, again, keeping in mind that you're dealing in a low margin business. So the reason we're going to use Dot Foods, excuse me, and show you the portal and some of the functionality that we're going to show you today, the reason we picked them is if you're not familiar with them, they are the largest redistributor in the world. And being a redistributor really puts them in a very, very unique position, because as Lynn was just explaining, all those different programs and sales incentives and distributor finance and all the different angles, well really Dot sees them all, because Dot obviously, as a redistributor, they have relationships with the manufacturers, they have relationships with the distributors and food service people, and they also have relationships directly with those retailers, restaurants, and end users. So they see those transactions from both directions, where they have to reconcile something. If a manufacturer, for instance, drop ships something to an end user, even though there may be a distributor involved, in there, and there are deductions or other deviations that need to be settled. Again, they tend to be in the middle of that, whether they're in the middle in terms of having to provide data or being the repository or whatever that relationship may be. So they really see things from all angles and really have a very complex business process. So they provide a very unique perspective. Lynn, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to you, and Lynn's going to show you some of what we're doing in DOT. And again, I want to keep in mind here that this is first in a series, so it would just take way too long to show you all the things. So we're going to hit on some of it here today, and then we will circle back, and I hope all of you and have the opportunity to come back, and seriously we'll make the announcements on when the future series are going to be, so that we can complete the picture. But at this point, Lynn, I'm going to hand it over to you and fire away.
Okay. And as Jim mentioned, DOT's in the middle of a lot of transactions. When they approached us to help them with a solution, they wanted to improve customer service externally to their suppliers and with their customers, and they wanted to improve internal transaction efficiencies related to disputes and deductions. And really, to make all that happen, they really needed to improve the flow of information between all the parties involved. Thankfully, DOT had a vision, which is always a great starting point. But they understood that vision was going to include process behavior change as well as bringing in technologies. And as Jim mentioned, at the start of the webinar, ICG is a consultant, an integrator, and a technology provider. And so they had a lot of the constructs of what they wanted to do, but there were still some pieces that were missing. So together, we worked with them to lay out a roadmap to expand the communication capabilities between all the parties in a transaction. The ultimate goal was to allow the suppliers to have access to backup and information for all the deductions taken by DOT. And again, with their deductions, it includes deductions for pricing issues, deductions for marketing or wait times, and also for customer deductions. And really what that means is one of DOT's customers would deduct from DOT, who would then have to turn around and deduct from the supplier. So they, again, needed to make sure that all that information was flowing through. So the first step of what DOT wanted to do, and you can see on the screen, that this is the landing page for DOT's portal, and what they really try to do again is make sure that that's easy to use, and to make sure that all the information is communicated effectively. So one of the first things that they did was to install Invoice Inquiry. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time walking through Invoice Inquiry, because I would imagine most of you have Invoice Inquiry or have seen demonstrations of it a few different times. But I do want to use it as a launching point to show you what the capabilities are and how DOT has taken a basic Invoice Inquiry and really expanded its capabilities. So we're just going to do a real basic search here of the invoices paid in the last 7 days. You can see that there's quite a bit of invoices that have been paid in the last 7 days. I'm going to go ahead and sort this by invoice number. And, this again is pretty basic. We've got, showing them invoice number, invoice date, what the check amount is, the basic tenets of the invoice itself. But one of the tricks here with DOT is what they allow you to do once you have this piece of information up. And so with DOT, they've given their suppliers the ability to see some additional invoice details, to view customer deduction backup, and I'll get back to that one in a minute. I'm going to show you that they have the ability to see, in the instance where DOT has not paid what the invoice amount was, what were those adjustments? And this is an example of those adjustments. So in this particular instance, we're interfacing with their system to bring that information back in and present it to the supplier. And that's critical, because now we don't have the suppliers calling asking for this sort of backup. And the suppliers have the ability to export this information if they want, or they can just look at it on screen. So now let's just say that you're doing the cash application and you've looked at this and you're saying, I don't agree with this pricing error. For whatever reason, you don't agree with the pricing error. I can now go back to this item and click on that icon again, and I can actually from here submit a dispute. So there's no picking up the phone, there's no sending another email. Right from here, I can submit a dispute. And so by clicking that particular button, I'm starting the process. So I've populated, this is going to be an AP invoice. There's a number of different categories. Knowing that it's an AP invoice, maybe I don't agree and it's invoice paid short. We're going to do an issue description. Maybe it's the timing. Maybe there was a pricing change and that's the issue. So I'm going to go ahead and press that as my issue description. And now you can see we've populated the information from the item in the portal back into this dispute. And so this will now help, once submitted, this will help DOT have the information they need to process the dispute as needed. They can, and by doing it this way, again, through the portal, they can do all this on their own time. As soon as they're done submitting this, this goes right into a workflow for DOT. And it just saves everybody a lot of time. Everything is all in one place, which is really important when you're dealing with the volumes of transactions of this nature. I'm actually going to cancel out of this. And I want to go back and I want to show a little bit about seeing some of the other backup here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over here, see if I can find one that has some customer backup. And in this particular example, this item was an actual deduction and it was taken from the customer. And what DOT has done here is they've actually passed through the backup that the customer provided to DOT so that now the supplier has access to that same information. So that's the backup they need. And this is really powerful because now, DOT's customers don't have to call and ask for more information, or DOT suppliers don't have to call and ask for more information for that backup. So this has really saved everyone a lot of time, and DOT suppliers have been very welcoming to this functionality, knowing that this is all available. Heading back again, one of the other options, and I need to do a sort here to try to get to the right piece of information. Actually, and let me redo this search real quick. One of the other things that happens in DOT's world is they may have some miscellaneous accounts receivable. So it may be that there's special marketing or special or a special deal between DOT and their supplier, and that's why a deduction came into play. In that case, you'll notice there's some extra options here. And this is a whole different system within DOT that we go and pull information in to present. And so what happens is now we present an invoice, and this is yet another form of backup. And so really what we're trying to show is, in DOT's complex world, they've got a myriad of different systems that I guess contribute to their process. And the functionality that we've provided is almost a wrapper to those systems where we can pull it all together, and in one place the vendor can get at what they need to in order to continue and be efficient in their world, and DOT has as well. So one of the other things that we talked about when we were putting this portal together was trying to make sure it just wasn't a one-way street between the supplier and DOT. And so what we realized is that in processing disputes, there are times when the supplier themselves may have to provide information back on a dispute. So let's say that someone submitted a dispute, but maybe they didn't provide enough backup for their side of the story. DOT has the capability to return that dispute back to the supplier through this portal. So everything is all in one place. So the supplier comes in, again, I'm working this as a supplier. They come in and they'll have a list of things that they may need to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and pick one. And again, this is a presentation of the dispute as submitted by the supplier. And what you'll see here is when you click on the timeline, you can see the history of events going on here and what's happening. And so there's a back and forth going between the supplier and DOT trying to get this resolved. Again, if everything is all in one place, it's more efficient for everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here real quick. So now we've looked at everything from the supplier perspective, and it's great that we've made it efficient for the supplier, but we also needed to make sure that for DOT, we made their process more efficient. So once the suppliers submit the dispute, it goes into a workflow. And depending on the types of categories and issues that the supplier selects, it'll route through different aspects of the DOT organization. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the dispute processing from the internal view. And we're going to go into the AP view. And again, just to make it clear for DOT, they've got 3 different buckets of potential, or 3 different areas of a potential dispute. One is just for the AP invoices. One would be things the customer deducted. And then a third are just the internal workings, or they call them miscellaneous deductions that can be taken from a supplier's check. So as a processor within the DOT AP organization, they'll open up this queue, and this is all the current work that's sitting out there for them. They can do things here from a task list perspective. They could sort by submit date. They could sort by dispute amount. So maybe internally they want to work the largest disputes first. They also have the ability to filter. To get at certain things. So let's say that there was an initiative to make sure that we cleared out all of the disputes from last year. So you could take the dispute date. You could say is before, say 1/1/2018, and maybe you just want to make sure for now that you're going for things that are over $20,000. So you can add a second filter in. And we are going to go for the dispute amount is greater than, say, $5,000. So we filter the list, and there's 14 pages, but now after we filter it, really there's only one we have to work with, because there's only one that's greater than $5,000 from last year. So we can go in again, open this deduction up, and try to see what's happening with it and try to get it resolved. Again, this is a very similar user interface, just trying to make sure that everyone has the same set of data working for them. And you'll notice as we scroll through, and I apologize for not doing this earlier, suppliers can attach backup to which everybody can view. Internally, if you want to attach backup, there's an option to allow it to be just internally viewed or internally and externally viewed. And that's important because sometimes there's some sensitive information you don't want your suppliers to see. Going through the timeline here, you can see that, over time, people have been trying to work this dispute. There just seems to be a disagreement. But you can see the full history of what's been happening with this transaction. And so it's not as if you have to have the same person work this dispute over and over and over again. With the flexibility to have all this information available through the timeline, really anybody can pick up the ball and finish processing this when the time comes. I'm going to go out of here real quick. I mentioned that there are differences between the AP invoices, the deduction invoices, and the MAR invoices. One of the things to realize is, the categories and the issues that go on between the different groups, the end result could mean that you need someone in a warehouse to look at it versus you need someone who's in charge of programs to look at it. And that's important only because, again, you want to make sure as quickly as possible to get this item into the right person's hands to solve the problem. Whether it's something that's going to be denied or ultimately paid back, the best outcome for everyone is to get that resolved as quickly as possible. Lastly, I want to talk about some of the search capabilities, because it's great that you can, search, or that you can look in the queues and see what's there. But the other part of this is tracking. And we do allow tracking externally, so the supplier can go back in and see what the status is of a dispute. And then internally, we beef that up a little bit, because this actually helps to form some of the reporting capabilities that most people need in the management of their process. So, giving people a lot of options to search is huge. So let's say that someone was trying to figure out, okay, as a company, how much are we paying back, or how many of our disputes are because we've paid the item previously. So we can go to the dispute type of customer deduction. Category is paid previously. So this was paid previously by somebody. So let's say we want to know how many we're overpaying. So we've paid the invoice and the customer has paid it as well. And let's say that we want to see how much of that was last year. So I'm going to go ahead and enter in last year, and then go in this year, and I'm going to do a search. And you'll see there's quite a bit of items that we have paid. That's basically a double pay. So in this instance, for whatever reason, DOT has paid the invoice and the customer has paid the invoice as well. This is important information to know, because then you want to probably loop back around and figure out how can we go solve that problem. But the nice part about tracking is giving you the power to get at the data you need, and having all the data related to these disputes in one place is critical. So, as Jim had said, we're going to be breaking this into different webinars, because this is just one piece of the pie. We can talk more, and we will in the future, about deduction processing. So this is the side of the equation where the customer deducts from you, and how do you process that, and how does that flow then through into the disputes. But this was the initial step to really set DOT on a path to make sure that from a supplier perspective, they were able to provide the information to their suppliers as quickly as possibly, as completely as possibly, and on their own timeframes, again, in order to maximize the efficiencies. And Jim, with that, I think we are done with the demo portion of the webinar.
Great. I noticed a few of you have figured out that we have the ability to ask questions, and my apologies for not excuse me, making that announcement up front. But there is a place there for you to ask questions. So if you have questions, by all means submit them, and we'll try to get to them. Lynn, thank you for the demo. A few questions I had for you that might be helpful for our audience out there. This looks like a pretty involved portal with a lot of different functionality. Could you talk a little bit just about how DOT went about this? I mean, did they put everything in all at once, or what approach did they take of getting all this functionality into a portal?
Oh, sure. So they didn't do it all at once. They did it over time. So they started off with invoice inquiry. And then they went in and put in everything related to disputes. So they allowed suppliers to, what I just showed, submit disputes, and then all of the dispute processing. The third phase was the deduction processing. So that was the part where customers are deducting from them, and there's a whole workflow involved in making sure that those deductions are legitimate. And then the final part so far has been the ability for customers to come in, and when they make a delivery and the driver leaves, if there's some change to the receiving information as the customer goes through and actually receives in the product formally, the customer has a way of logging in and pulling up that order and submitting changes to the receiving information. And that's been a huge saver for the DOT folks, because it actually helps the transactions. It helps improve the accuracy of the transactions earlier on in the process.
Great, and I know they've been using this for a while. Just as a matter of interest, I mean, DOT came to us really because one of their customers, U.S. Foods, was a big user of their services, and U.S. Foods had been using some of our solutions and portals for quite a number of years, and Dot kind of asked them, and they've taken it really to kind of a whole new level. So,
Right.
thank you, Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
Switch back. Okay, now we have some questions coming in, so let's go ahead and go with those. Lynn, you can help me out with some of these. One of the questions we have is, how do vendors react to these kinds of solutions, and what kind of adoption rates was Dot seeing?
The vendors have reacted really well. I think for a couple of reasons. One, there's no charge to the vendor to use this. This was something that, you know, some portals and some capabilities, B2B capabilities, charge the suppliers, and that's just not how this works. And Dot chose not to charge their suppliers to do this. And so as a result, the suppliers have all been very receptive to this. Their adoption has been, you know, in Dot's world has been very high. It's been I think over 95, 98% adoption. And so it's been great, and it's been really, I think the gains that Dot has made are probably even more than they anticipated, because the adoption rate was even higher than they expected.
Super. Another question we have is, are these portals cloud-based, or do they have to go on our servers? I can answer that one. Yeah, the majority of our solutions are cloud-based, but the answer to that is either. We really have Dots, for instance, at this moment anyway, is behind the firewall on their servers, although I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn, I believe that's changing in the not too distant future, where they're going to move that into our cloud and manage it that way. But the majority of these solutions are cloud-based. It can go either way, which kind of tags on to another question we had in regarding security, and I'm assuming that, you know, in a cloud-based environment, that question came from the context of that question on security. Yeah, our security is really all, you know, highly secure, kind of military grade security. I'm not a technical person, so I won't go into all of that. If this person wants to really get into that kind of a more technical conversation, certainly just reach out to us. You see our web address there. There's a form. You can send a question in, and I'll put you in touch with the person to answer that. But the answer is very secure. For our cloud base, we use Amazon Web Services, is where we host our cloud, that all of our portals go in. So that is, you know, they are really kind of the Cadillac in that world, and have all of the requisite security measures built into theirs, as well as others that we take ourselves. So good question on that one. We have one question, Lynn. We are changing our ERP next year. Would we have to start all over with one of these?
Thankfully, no. A number of our clients have actually switched out their ERP systems, and it's not a start all over situation by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously the integrations would have to change, but we really try to make sure that the impact to the user is minimal, if non-existent. So we try to keep the user interfaces the same, and then just deal with everything in the background.
Great. Next question coming in is, we might need some help with our process. Our processes are very old and manual. Is this something you can help with? Short answer is yes, and since that really falls in Lynn's bailiwick, I'll let her explain that. But we certainly do help our clients and prospective clients with that. And Lynn, you want to expand on that a little bit?
Sure, and we actually do like to help too. I mean, we've, as Jim, I think, mentioned earlier in the webinar, we deal with a lot of different industries, and we've had exposure to a lot of different industries, and even personally, our consultants on the business side have worked in different sorts of transacting environments, and so we bring with us a lot of deep experience to offer up guidance and suggestions. Having said that, we know that every company has its own culture. All the industries are different. You know, as we've, you know, this webinar is just about the food industry, but we understand that and have been there. And so we offer up suggestions and help you knowing what the to-be technology state will be. and then work with you to help implement that, because we know that just saying to change it is one thing, but the actual change, getting everybody on board, getting everybody changed, and then making sure that the change sticks, that's really where the rubber meets the road. And that's frankly where we see the success of a solution like this, or we see a failure of it, because if the technology is great, but if it's not used the way that it should be, and if the business process doesn't support it, then you won't see the benefits. So we actually do, we strongly encourage our process consulting as a part of the engagements.
Super. Thank you. Excuse me. And then the final question we have is, do you work with our IT platforms and partners? The answer to that is yes. As I kind of touched on early on in the presentation, we're a systems agnostic, systems independent, whatever you want to call it, business. So we really work with, and then that's part of the process. So not only, as Lynn just talked about, helping on the business side of the house with, with your processes and how that's going to fit in, and working with you on that. We do the same on the IT side. So if you need help on the IT side, particularly if you're not going cloud-based, where you're going to need a little more IT help, but even if you do, absolutely, we work with not only your internal IT staff, but if you need us to work with your IT partners, be it the ERP platforms or other lines of business applications you may be dealing with that need, these solutions need to integrate with, absolutely, our team is more than happy to, sit in on meetings with your IT staff as well as your partners, communicate directly with your partners, kind of whatever it takes. So, super. Well, if any of you come up with questions, because inevitably I either miss some questions or people come up with questions after we get off the webinar that they thought of and say, darn it, I wish I'd asked that. You see the email addresses for both myself and Lynn on the screen. Feel free to reach out and touch base with us if you have a question, if you want more information, you want to talk about a little bit more, whatever the case may be. We're always available to sit and chat. We hope that you found this webinar informative, and we really do thank you for your time. I'm going to give you a few minutes back today, but we know your time is valuable, so we appreciate that. Do keep an eye out. Obviously, you're all in our database, so you will be getting the announcements of the next round of webinars on this particular subject matter, as well as others, and we hope to see you there. There will be a recording of this session today, so you'll have the availability to go on our website and see that, and I believe we can probably send you a copy of that. So, or if you want a copy, just email me and let me know. Again, thank you so much for your time, and we hope you found this informative, and hope to see you on the next session. Thank you very much.